Hey there, we're the West Lot Pirates and welcome to the show. We're here to share our thoughts on Northwestern athletics and college sports, with thoughts and analysis from the visceral to the statistical. We run our tailgate with the red pirate flag flying high above, as we give no quarter, especially the fourth. I'm Sam Walter.
I'm John Lacombe.
And I'm Eric Scouspo.
Oh, well, guys, we are back. We are starting what will be our 15th year of doing this podcast, which is just wild and completely dating ourselves here. But, you know, just for all of our new listeners, because, you know, a bunch of, you know, I know we have a bunch of new listeners coming in for football season. Welcome. You know, we are, I guess, the Northwestern podcast, and, you know, have been for the past 15 years. So, you know, all our returning listeners, you know who we are. But for our new listeners, you know, just a little bit about us. I mean, the three of us went to Northwestern as undergrads. It's been 25 years for me. Yeah, my 25-year reunion is this year. That's, you know, breaking my brain. But,
what's crazy is we've been doing this podcast for well over half of our alumni-dom.
I know, that's wild, isn't it?
In fact, for more than half of our entire Northwestern fandom, assuming it started, you know, around freshman year for all three of us.
Let's put it this way. Scuzz and I are both in Damian Anderson's class at Northwestern, and it has been several years now since Damian Anderson's son was at Northwestern. So it's the time sneaks up on you for sure. The one thing, you know, Sam, you mentioned the other new people, new listeners coming in. I mean, again, I know we're pulling in listeners all the time. A lot of you know, and this may be why some of you are here, we're part of the College Huddle Network now, and it's been over a year, I think, since we've been on board. And that network, you can look on our Twitter feed and see it's pinned to our the pinned tweet. You can see the map of the current state of the College Huddle Network. And, you know, props to JR, props to the group of guys at the core, you know, that are working to build this thing, but it's really built out. And you can look and see that, you know, there are pods crisscrossing the nation representing just about every school in the country right now. And not just big schools too, but I mean, like schools like Kennesaw State, etc. And that's awesome. And I think for any of our core listeners who have ventured out and checked out some of this content, and if you haven't, we encourage you to, or for people who are like more familiar with the College Huddle Network as a whole, who are coming in, like, I want to stress, like, we're aware through doing this, like, there are so many pods representing so many schools and so many people doing such a great job of previewing all of these different teams. And I think what we would say, and Sam touched on it right off the top, is what we can draw on when you listen to all of these summer previews that we're going to be diving into is 15 years of experience. We've been doing these things forever. So when we're previewing a team, we're not just dropping out of the sky to do it. We're folding in all of that context, and we're trying to give you a piece of the entire road that has led that team to wherever it is right now.
And obviously we come at it from a Northwestern point of view. That's who we are. We love Northwestern. We have forever. And, you know, we're here to talk about, you know, we're not professionals, you know, we're not, you know, media members per se, but we call it the way we see it, you know, and we're not here to play gotcha. We're not here to like come down on any of the players because they're 18 to 24-year-old kids. And yes, the landscape has changed, you know, the professionalism and, you know, with the NIL and everything. I mean, by the time anyone listens to this, it's probably changed from when we're actually recording it, and that is probably like 24 hours. But, you know, the landscape has changed. So, you know, we're just going to be here to talk about the team we love and, you know, put everything in our own perspective. And, you know, that's really what we're here to do.
We get called out sometimes for being a little too Pollyannish, a little too optimistic, if you will. I think what we like to do is paint the art of the possible of how Northwestern can get to where we want to see them go, how it can come together. We will certainly talk about what's going wrong, what's not working, what we think they could or should do differently. But we're not here to yell at each other or y'all or Northwestern. I mean, there are moments where we get fired up, but we're here to have fun and to celebrate you know, our school and this team. And, you know, if you've been with us, obviously, you know that we spend a tremendous amount of time with lacrosse and softball and basketball and a number of
Field
other
hockey
programs,
now.
field hockey, baseball, throughout the season. But if you will, this is our Super Bowl. These summer previews kick off, the part of the year that we spend the most time and energy. Sometimes we get it wrong. I like to think we get it pretty right a lot of the time. To John's point, we've been doing this for a long time. It doesn't make us experts, but
No.
it has helped us kind of hone and understand where to go looking, and where sometimes we'll say more like broad national or high level media kind of misses the boat, or gets it wrong, or makes a quick assumption, or doesn't realize something's going to matter. And we hope you join us for these forays into Northwestern's. Well, we're starting with the non-opponents, the ones we don't play, but then as we get into the schedule, we'll go through team by team. Everybody NU's going to play this year. We'll finish with the Cats pretty much right before we jump into week 1 of the season.
And, not to pat ourselves on the back, be a Phil Steele about it, but, we did call Michigan 2 years ago when no one else did.
That's true.
We were on the Michigan bandwagon.
There was
no one else was.
The giant podcast poll that came out in the spring. Everybody had Georgia except for 2 schools, us and a podcast from Michigan.
Then last year we said that Ohio State wasn't going to win it all, but you can only be right so many times, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey.
and we are right, we are wrong. But I'm still proud of the way we nailed that Michigan pick a couple years ago, and the way we were completely right on the entire Scott Frost era at Nebraska.
Oh yeah, we did really hammer that one.
Don't Sam, don't lead me down a rabbit hole, because Scott Frost, literally the day that we're recording this, told The Athletic that it was a mistake for him to take that job.
I bet
I saw that headline. I did get
he's
the chance to read that
not the
article.
only one that thinks that.
No,
And
he's
again,
not.
it's like, look, if the Westlaw Pirates could have told you that 5 years ago, but
Which we did.
lest we digress, we'll get to Nebraska eventually.
We will.
That'll
We
be
will.
pods down the road.
So what we're here to do tonight, we are here to talk about, now we look at the conference. It is a giant conference. There's 18 teams. Northwestern does not play a lot of them. So we're not going to go deep into these teams, but we do want to get a sense of the landscape of the conference. So we're going to look at 4 of the teams Northwestern does not play tonight. Next time, we're going to talk about the other 4. Before we get into the schedule, and we kind of go more in depth on every team that we're gonna see. Want to start off with the defending champs, Ohio State. They won it all last year, and that team was insane. And you heard all about how much money they spent, putting that team together. And when they lost to Michigan at the end of the year, we were giggling with glee and watching just heads exploding in Columbus. And then they came back and got into in the playoff. They just turned it on and took care of business in kind of epic proportions here, winning that first big expanded playoff. But they turn over a lot. This is a very new team, and I guess every team is going to be very new now, with transferring and NIL being the way it is. It's not as easy to kind of get a sense of what these teams are at this point in the summer, coming in at the beginning of July. But, we see what Ohio State is. We see what Ohio State has been. John, can you take us through the Ohio State defense, what we're looking at possibly this year?
Well, I'm glad you started where you started with this whole idea of like the crazy landscape and players coming in, players coming out. This new world we've all had to familiarize ourselves with in the span of a couple of short years. But it to me, and I guess as my intro into like looking at this defense, it feels like they're on the top of the Buckeyes are on the top of the college football world right now, not just because they won a national championship, but because it just feels like they're doing this better than everybody. They're doing this thing, the new thing that college football is now. I would say there's no school that feels more like an NFL farm system than Ohio State right now. I think that's just how they want it. That's just how Buckeye fans want it. But they're embracing not only the acquisition of the best talent on a year-to-year basis, right? Factoring in the portal and guys coming in, guys coming out. But, and I think this is going to be the standard, and I know Scuzz is going to talk a little about this when it gets to him too, but I mean, with the rapid turnover within their coaching staff as well. So the Jim Knowles era in Columbus is now over. It may very well be remembered as the best defensive era in Ohio State football history, one of the best defensive eras of any football team ever. I think, and this goes to where we talked about the history of us previewing these teams year after year. I mean, the book on the Buckeyes for a lot of years was that the talent level just didn't match up with the performance on the field, that it would just be like 5-star guys forever. And you'd be like, well, then why aren't the numbers better? Why isn't the performance better? And Knowles came in and changed that. And he made Ohio State's defense better every year that he was there, literally statistically better every year. And
Which is
topped
what
out
Jim
with
Knowles does. I mean,
That's a trend that goes
what,
back way before the Buckeyes.
He remains, and you know, down the road we'll talk about Penn State and we'll talk about this unreal streak that he's trying to keep alive here, but he's been doing it for like a decade now. But it topped out. We said 1 year ago this was going to be the best defense in the nation, and that's exactly what it was. And now, like Sam said, not only is a titanic amount of talent gone off of this defense, but Knowles has gone as well. And talking about this new era, this new landscape, the new world we're all living in, let me just say, it's a lot easier for me to stomach what Knowles did after this season in an era where players get paid and guys can transfer wherever they want. Because Knowles basically jumped ship on Ohio State, not necessarily because they didn't pay him what he wanted, but because they didn't offer him the money on the timetable he wanted them to offer him the money on. He basically was like, you should offer me the money by now, and you didn't, so I'm just leaving. And again, on the other hand, it's kind of surprising Ohio State just didn't pony up the cash right away, given how incredible he is. But given everything we said, who they're replacing him with is not surprising in the least, because Ohio State's trying to be an NFL farm team right now, and they went and got an NFL coach, and that's Matt Patricia. So Patricia, obviously, you know him, you know the Patriots, you know his ill-fated stint with the Lions, you know him going back as whatever he was at the end of his Patriots tenure, quote-unquote offensive coordinator, whatever. Let's keep it 100. He'd leave Ohio State in a second if a quality defensive coordinator job opened up for him in the NFL and was offered to him.
Or a non-quality NFL defensive coordinator job.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? Because we also know that's not going to happen, because his NFL track record is spotty, to say the least, beyond that initial run in New England. But his pro bona fides are as heavy as you can get. He is just an NFL coach. He always has been. And he's like, has a name as an NFL coach. So even still, this is a guy who's a long time removed from major success. And he's dealing with a team with massive turnover, including that entire defensive line. All of them are stars. They're all in the NFL. I don't need to go through them all. They're four of the best defensive linemen in all of football. So that unit that's replacing them is entirely green, completely. And they have to replace a star cornerback in Denzel Burke, an elite linebacker in Cody Simon. These are NFL guys. And they're losing the best defensive coordinator in college football. There's all this weight of expectation. There's this question of like, can Patricia even develop talent at the college level? That's a lot to be dealing with. So it's very helpful for Ohio State as they deal with these things. It's just a good thing to have. It's nice to have the best player in college football. That's just nice. It's nice when you're dealing with any kind of change or any kind of problem to be like, well, it sure is great we have the best player in college football on our team. Caleb Downs would have been a top 5 NFL draft pick if he'd come out last year. Instead, he stayed in Columbus. He's going to be the talisman at safety that keeps this whole thing humming. He's the best player we saw last year, easily. We talked about it last year. He looked unreal during the game, and then we went back and watched the tape. It was just stunning what he was doing away from the ball, what he's reading on a play-to-play basis. He's going to start in the NFL for a decade, at least. He's a perfect safety. It'll be interesting to see how Ohio State going through all this flux leans on him and in what way. So I was reminded of the final Jabril Peppers year at Michigan, where the Michigan defensive goal was basically just to involve Jabril Peppers in every single defensive play somehow. And Downs isn't really that kind of guy. He's a classic safety. He's not like some hybrid linebacker, some guy who's going to platoon. He's the pure version of the position. But you can still expect to see him everywhere, all over the place, making plays because he's that level of player. He's like unreal. And still, they still have Davison Igbenison at corner. They still have Sonny Styles at linebacker. And like, I feel like we always say this with Ohio State, but every single guy who's going to come in who hasn't already played a lot is a 4 or 5 star guy. They just haven't played yet. So there's only so much things can drop off. But still, this is coming off a couple years where they were the best or close to the best defense in college football. Ton of untested players on the field here. And Patricia is going to be under pressure to prove that he's up for this. So, and again, as all of this is happening, everyone in Columbus is going to have a side eye at whatever Jim Knowles is doing at Penn State. So they're going to be great, but it is a fascinating amount of turnover to have to watch unfold.
I'm really curious. I don't know if there are any other competitors for this, but I'm really curious if anyone will beat out Matt Patricia for the Brian Ferentz. I might not be good at my job, but the guy in the role above me is good at their job, and I'm benefiting from that on a halo, and I've turned it into a career award.
Yeah, right.
Is there anybody else that even qualifies, or should we just give it to Matt Patricia now?
I know. I mean, right? I mean, at some point we're like, well, he's got Bill Belichick and he's got that pencil under his hat. So, but yeah, it is true. But again, rubber meets the road. I mean, he's got no shortage of talent here. But yeah, I mean, it's like, this is not Jim Knowles. I mean, not even close to Jim Knowles. This is a guy who has pro bona fides, but hasn't had a great level of success in a while, replacing the guy who's literally the best thing at this job going right now, who is Knowles. So yeah, but again, with Downs, and they've got at least one great guy at every level, and a bunch of 5 stars. They'll be fine. They're just not going to be the number 1 defense in the nation.
This feels like when Charlie Weiss came to Indiana. the state, Dame, yeah. The state, not the school.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, if Matt Patricia doesn't do well, will Ohio State fans handle it well? Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely a well-adjusted bunch down there in Columbus, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my God. Sure. I can't wait to tell you guys who's coaching the offense.
I can't wait to hear. Take us through that offense. I mean...
So I owe an apology, and the apology I owe is to Will Howard, because at this time last year, I questioned if Will Howard could really elevate his play coming to Ohio State, and if he could really be better than Kyle McCord. Because when you looked at their 2023 records, they looked pretty much the same. I may also an apology to Chip Kelly, because I questioned if he could really unlock this offense. I said they were going to be incredible. They were going to be super duper good. They were going to be better than the year before, but I just didn't think they'd have the chips to beat Oregon. And I looked like a genius in mid-October, and then come playoff time, the script flipped, and Howard very much elevated his play. Chip Kelly completely retooled this run game. Yes, there was, $20 million of NIL money and $1 million of penalty money that went into this team last season that allowed them to weather those 4 playoff games. But in my defense, while Ohio State achieved their heart's desire last season, their offense did not come close to the lofty heights of the Ryan Day coached offenses prior to 2023. And when you break down the season, they were dog shit for 6 weeks. After losing to Oregon, Ohio State, $20 million roster in all, not just the best defensive player in college football, the best offensive player in college football in Jeremiah Smith. They averaged 214 yards per game in the next 6 Big Ten games.
Wow.
a stretch that included Purdue and Northwestern. And they didn't go over 300 against either of us.
Which is wild.
That is very wild. 260 against Purdue, 247 against us. Now, granted, they were winning big in all these contests. There were also a lot of injuries on their offensive line that disrupted their offense, no doubt. But they fell into this mode of this ball control style that, frankly, was inexplicable. Like, the fact that they adopted this was madness, given their talent advantage. And it was directly responsible for that loss to Michigan. Now, perhaps it was a blessing in disguise because that loss promptly woke them up, and the offense roared to average 290 yards per game against the likes of Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame throughout the playoff. But man, like a tale of two cities in those 10 games. Now this year, with overwhelming turnover, I expect them to basically go to that ball control style as their default, because I don't know that they can turn it up without greatly risking turnovers and inconsistency, etc. And it goes to the quarterback room. The quarterback room is extremely inexperienced. Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keinholz, and Tavian St. Clair have exactly 34 attempted college passes between them. Yes, these guys have all, I think they're all at least a redshirt season with the teams. Sayin got plenty of time with the scout team last year. He, got time this spring. So he's not, it's not like his first day on campus. But in addition, their offensive line lost 3 guys to the NFL. Yes, they brought in a couple transfers, but they lose both Quinshon Junkins and Travion Henderson, who were very much the engine of the team last year. And I just, you have to think the run game is going to have a step back. There's going to be more pressure on the quarterback in the passing game. And even with the best wide receiver in the game in Jeremiah Smith, they bring back Carnell Tate. There's an insane set of talent coming back into all these different positions that were vacated by, guys going to the NFL. It's really hard to imagine this team holding a candle to what they did last year. Now, maybe all they need is a triumphant Ryan Day, who can enter this season with a tiny fraction of the pressure and criticism he sustained over the last 5 years, which, they lost to Michigan. Was it 3 years in a row or 4? I think it was 4.
Yeah.
And in many, many moments over the last, many years, you could just see the sphincters tightening. You could feel it when Ohio State was up against the wall. And the fact that they came through in that Texas game is probably the biggest to me that was the biggest moment that they overcame. They were legit at risk of losing that game and managed to pull it back, and that is the difference in the Ohio State of last year versus the prior 4 or 5 years. So maybe that's all they need, is the pressure is released, the expectations are released for at least one season. They can come in loose and exuberant and ride that lightning to another great season. But I think it is hard offensively to put those pieces together. And yes, the defense is going to be really good. It feels like they're going to be squeaking out a lot of games. There is one potentially hysterical thing to watch in all of this. And I will admit to have just learning this. I think I probably read it previously and it just didn't resonate for some reason. But Chip Kelly, now finally a national championship winning assistant coach, has departed Ohio State after 1 season. And he's now coaching the Raiders offense. Not exactly a prime NFL job. And to replace him, the Ohio State Buckeyes have decided to run it back, baby. It is 2023 all over again. Brian Hartline, who in his 1 year as offensive coordinator in 2023 oversaw the worst Buckeye offense since Luke Fickell was interim head coach, is back as offensive coordinator in 2025. I can already hear the wailing and the gnashing of teeth from Buckeye fans. Now, alternatively, like I said before, like Ryan Day now released from the shackles of expectations, he may never lose again. I don't know.
Wow.
It's funny with Heartline too, right? Because it's like either he finally breaks it through as an offensive coordinator, right? Or like, is there a guy being like, is there a greater Peter Principle offensive guy? Like,
right? Yeah,
as
incredible wide receiver coach. Yeah,
that guy's resume is insane.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I like the upside here is Day with all that pressure off of him can flex a bit back toward, because he used to call plays when he first became head coach. He was still calling plays, and those C.J. Stroud years, like, they were incredible. But they couldn't get over the hump, and that's like he was like, all right, I have to focus on head coach duties, and that's probably still true. But in this 1 year of blissful, post-coital, reverence and space, maybe he can lean back in and help Heartline, and they can come through. But there's like the doors cracked open for a very frustrating offensive season for Ohio State fans, and they might not care. But if I know Ohio State fans come like November 1st, they're really going to care.
Yeah, I for sure. Interesting schedule. As we quickly run through that, they open. You talked about their playoff game against Texas. They get Texas week 1. Big noon on Big Noon Saturday, which everyone seems to just love.
This is in the shoe, right?
It is in the shoe. It's an 11 a.m. Central kick in the shoe against Texas, and yeah, I mean that is the game of week 1. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Then they play Grambling and Ohio before getting into Big Ten play. They travel to Washington after a bye week. They're home for Minnesota. They're at Illinois and Wisconsin. They come home they get a bye week after Wisconsin. Then they play Penn State at home. They're at Purdue. They're home for UCLA. They get UCLA in mid-November at home. And then they finish off with Rutgers, and then they travel to Michigan for Thanksgiving week.
I find it all. I mean, here's where we talk about the history, right? We have, and I mean, in the case of the Buckeyes, most of you have this, but it's funny, like, factored into all of this, you have to factor in when you look at the two most crucial games on their schedule, that Penn State can't beat Ohio State and Ohio State can't beat Michigan. And that is it's looming over all of this. And it's like, Penn State ought to be better, and I mean, I don't know where Michigan is, relative to where they were last year, but Ohio State is, I guess. So here's the thing. I mean, you talked about the weight of expectations, right? And you're right. Like, it makes a lot of sense. Where, I mean, so much of the schedule's cake that you're like, it's pretty easy to get to 10-2 on this schedule, and it's like, if truly the weight of expectations have been lifted by that title, and boy, that sure is easily said and done, considering it felt kind of like he needed to win a national title to keep his job entering that playoff. Then 10-2 and a smooth path into the playoff ought to be great for Ohio State. I mean, they're going to walk into the playoff at 10-2. But I definitely could see. I think you have to jump ahead right to like that aforementioned how they feeling on November 1st. If they lose that Texas game and they lose at Illinois, and then they're staring a third loss in the face when they're welcoming Penn State, then it's like no Buckeye fan will be remotely rational, because it's like that's not how it's going to happen. But
9 wins is right out.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. That's the thing, right? Like, there's no, and to the point, it's like a cushion a little bit, but this team is expecting to just totally do it all over every season and play for a national title every season under this new system. I do think that, again, you look at everything Penn State has, and again, I'm not going to put the cart before the horse. We'll get to Penn State down the road. But you look at so much of what Penn State has, and you're just like, this ought to be enough for this Ohio State team that is definitely not what they were last season. It ought to be enough for Penn State, but Penn State's got to go to Ohio State, and Penn State cannot get over this hump and has like made it clear that they just can't get it done. So with all that, I mean, again, like there's so much of the non-marquee part of their schedule. It looks like cake, and it is cake. But I mean, that trip to Illinois, I'll tell you this.
John, every time you say that, I'm imagining the Ohio Bobcat mascot and somebody cutting into it. Oh, it's cake.
Yeah, that's right.
Is it cake?
I will say, with Illinois, it is funny. Like in today's era of NIL, etc., Ohio State would take Luke Altmaier in a second. Like they can say everything they want about Julian Sayin all day, but last year they experienced every bit of the glory of pulling in a quarterback with 1 million starts who knows exactly what he's doing, and they don't have that this year. But again, with all that said, who knows what Texas is either? Who knows what Arch Manning really is? Again, Ohio State still has, as Scott said, this is a team that, for all of our talk, may have the best offensive and defensive player in the nation. So
when that best offensive player is a wide receiver, though, and when that best defensive player is a safety, versus like a defensive end, or even a middle linebacker, like it's a different calculus than if your quarterback, you've got a quarterback and a middle linebacker, or a quarterback and a rush end who are going to go 1-2 in the draft, and that it's just an interesting calculus.
Their quarterback and every defensive lineman basically haven't played.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty wild.
And you can argue with the exception of the Kyle McCord year, where he wasn't that bad, but he wasn't great. Quarterback and defensive line has been that's been the strength of this team. Those are the two things that make them go back to the Urban Meyer days. Like they ran the quarterback so hard, the offense couldn't function without the guy.
And you know what? Maybe it will be. Maybe Sayin will be awesome, and the defensive line will just click immediately, and they're going to be an awesome football team. I mean, it is. I mean, but
I want to give a little. I want to give a little context to your Penn State comment, because I think like the networks, everybody, they all make such a big deal of the Penn State Ohio State game every single year, and they've done this as long as I can remember. Since 2012, these teams have played 13 times, and Penn State has won once.
Right.
Buckeyes have won 8 straight. When you say that Penn State can't beat them, that is not a lie.
Right. And that's the thing. And then on the flip side, this ridiculous Michigan hump that they were supposed to finally get over. So I don't know.
So preposterous.
Yeah. And this is the thing. It's like, it's easy for us to be in the abstract and be like, you know what? Like 10 wins seems pretty easy to do here, and then a path into the playoff, and it's just like, if only in Ohio State fans' minds, I'm like, yeah, I mean, they're like, God help them if they lose to Texas and then lose at Illinois, because at that point they'd be 4-2, and you know what? That 4-2 Ohio State team that's at that spot is 100% making the playoff. I don't care if they start 4-2. And Ohio State fans will be losing their minds. It wouldn't make any difference. But, they're going to be great. But, if they slip up, it's sure going to be fun for the rest of us to watch.
Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Maryland. I mean, Maryland is a team that I am frankly shocked, and I think we all are shocked, that Mike Locksley is back.
Indeed.
Yeah, this is one of these ones where we'll get into it, but you can go back and listen to last year's Maryland preview and just like we had a crystal ball of what was going to happen here.
Yeah,
everything other than the part where Mike Locksley got fired.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I mean they struggled last year, 4-8, and yet they're running it back with Locksley again. We'll see how that goes. Tell us about the Terrapin D, John.
I mean, this is where it's tough, because it's tough to evaluate Maryland's defense, and I don't know if Scuzz feels this way. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But it's tough for me to evaluate their D in the face of that larger picture here, which is that this team quit on its coach halfway through. I mean, it's like this season went down the toilet. And Loxley, in every way, he's like the carbon copy of a guy who got fired the day after the season ended, except they didn't fire him. He's still the coach. I guess I'd chalk that up to the win over USC, which was by 1 point on October 19th. Because other than that, we were basically, like we said, we're like, this team very likely could lose its last 8 games of the season. And they lost 7 of them, and they won the other one by 1 point. And that 1 point might be why Loxley still has a job. So again, I don't know, how do you evaluate a defense when the wheels totally come off of the program like that? And how do you evaluate the performance of guys who were just like expecting to lose by the back 2/3 of the season? So this team gave up an abysmal 30 points a game last year. But prior to that point, and going to the season, the defense had kind of been solidly trending in the right direction under Brian Williams, the defensive coordinator. And we went through the whole thing. We've talked about a couple of years of there was this crazy situation where like they could have promoted him from within. They didn't. They hired another guy. He was there for 1 week. Then he left to take the Miami job. And then they promoted Williams, and Williams did a pretty good job. Well, as soon as this season ended, Williams left to take the same job at Jacksonville State. And it really feels like this is an ascendant coach who bailed on this situation because the wheels were falling off on Loxley, and the Maryland administration didn't want to pull the trigger on a guy because he'd had several strong years, in the program. And it was basically like a guy being like, look, I'm not going down with this ship. I can go to Jacksonville State and just kind of hit reset here. So Maryland is replacing Williams with Ted Monachino. And what you need to know about Ted Monachino is this guy has been an NFL coach in the college, or a coach in the college and pro ranks for 35 years. The longest he's ever been at one place is 5 years. And most of those stops over those 35 years are either 1 year long or 2 years long. This is not the kind of guy you want when your head coach is on life support, your players quit halfway through the season, and you just waved goodbye to a young, promising defensive coordinator. I don't like the look of this at all. In terms of the actual players, there isn't a ton to get into here. Maryland produced an abysmal 14 sacks in 12 games. That was worse than the Big Ten. There were a bunch of interesting pieces that could have comprised a mid-level defense last season, but it all went out the window when morale imploded. Williams maybe could have picked up some of those pieces this year because he knew those guys, he knew their strengths. I doubt it. But I have almost zero faith that Monachino can do it. I think he's steering a defensive ghost ship this year. I think there's a strong chance that neither he nor Loxley are around in 2026.
It's clear that coming off of last year, like the assistants were that's who they put it all on,
Yeah.
right? Because they've also let go their offensive coordinator, and they've hired Pep Hamilton.
Pep Hamilton.
Yeah, Pep Hamilton.
Where's he been?
So he was not coaching in college or NFL since 2022. He was with the Houston Texans for 22 and 21, Chargers before that, and then bounced around a number of different spots, including Michigan. What looks like DC Defenders. Is that XFL or is that?
Yeah, that's
USFL?
XFL.
XFL.
It's UFL now, but I think they were one of the XFL 3.0 teams.
Yeah, so I think like coming off of last year, and I guess I don't know, like it's funny because I was the one who was really stumping for like I don't know how they retain like Loxley after what is obviously going to be a big drop off year, and some of that was predicated on going from 22 to 23. Expectations were really high for this team because they had Talia Tagovailoa coming back for his senior year, and they made no headway, no progress. Coming off of that, losing Talia. You just felt like this team was primed to drop, and that's exactly what happened. And my thought was like, if you're the Maryland brass, like you were expecting to be able to build on what had been a successful couple of years since COVID, and to take this program to another level. And if that's not going to happen, like why do you stay invested in Loxley? Because it it's just like. Now this year, it's a full reset on offense. All the names are gone. Are they is he really going to have 3 years to build this thing back up again? And so it does feel like they're like, hey, you got to make some changes. It's like, cool, I'll fire the coordinators. We'll start fresh. And that feels short lived to me. But I guess by that same token, like, well, not by the same token, but I guess like one thing that's interesting that you can't deny. So this offense last year was not good. Their production had zero drop off from the year prior when Talia was there. Yards per game, passing, rushing, averages, all that sort of stuff. It all looked pretty good. But they scored a touchdown less per game, which I think speaks to like just how dynamic Talia was in high leverage situations. And also, the defense dropped off a cliff. I think they probably got put in some advantageous spots 2 years ago that they were not in last year. But here's what's nuts. This team, Maryland, 4-8 Maryland, produced 6 NFL draft picks this past spring.
How? I don't understand that.
Well, and
including 3rd and 7th round wide receivers.
This has been a thing though, and this is like you can look over the past decade, talking about our long stuff. You can look over the past decade with like a Rutgers or a Maryland and be like, there's a difference between having good guys and having cohesive football teams.
Yeah. But yeah. There is. So I think like it's not hard. Like you don't have to squint too hard to be able to identify some success. This team Loxley has recruited well and has developed players that have gone into the next level. I mean, this is not the only year that they put a bunch of guys into the draft, right?
Would you say Loxley knows the DMV?
I would say this is his 8th season, and he was an OC there for 4 years previously. So yes, I think he probably knows the DMV. But like all that being said, this year now 2025. Let's focus on this for on the offensive side. It's an enigma. I mentioned this before. All the familiar names are gone. The big wide receivers, Felton and Prather, are both in the NFL. The tight end Wade, running back Hemby, and quarterback Edwards, they all transferred. They all left. They lost another starter on offensive line, but there's some I don't know, some things to feel good about. Like last year's offensive line, like I think I quoted that Phil Steele said there's only one returning starter. But they've had a good spring, so Loxley is more optimistic than I am. Something of that nature in last year's magazine. And this year, they're bringing back like 3 returning starters. The unit is going to be a lot deeper. They have a lot more cohesion. Folks are really excited about Nolan Ray at running back, who played, he was decent in kind of relief of Hemby at times last year. They still have Octavian Smith, a absolute monster wide receiver who kind of becomes kind of the face of this team. He was the number 3 guy last year. They brought in another really good receiver in Jaleel Farouk from Oklahoma. So they're still like, their identity is still there. And then I think probably the X factor is Malik Washington. He's a really tantalizing true freshman QB. Loxley has never shied from playing freshman QBs in the past. And folks think he's got a pretty good one here in Washington. Even if all that is true, it portends like a really up and down year, especially because there's not, beyond Smith and I guess Farouk, there's not much established talent elsewhere on O. It's also possible that UCLA transfer Justin Martin wins the job. There's also a redshirt freshman, Christian Martin. No, they're not brothers. That would have been too good. But I think recall Tagovailoa's freshman year. It was 2020, so we got to take that with a grain of salt. Overall, statistically, it looked pretty similar to last year, like 23 points per game. They had decent yardage, but it was really up and down results, right? Getting like absolutely smoked by us, but then Talia would have moments later in the year that were pretty fascinating, and they gave some teams some run, et cetera. It just kind of showed the potential that Maryland could step up to behind a really good dynamic quarterback. And I kind of expect us to see something similar this year. They'll have a couple moments where everyone's like, whoa, look at Maryland. What happened? Because there's enough pieces there to maybe do something. But they're not going to be good. And I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of track and compare what, assuming it's Malik Washington, what his season looks like compared to the benchmark that Talia laid down 5 years ago. So that's what I'm going to be watching this team for. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I don't think they're going to be particularly good on offense, so probably I'll say about the same as last year is my guess.
Well, let's run through their schedule real quick. They open up with Florida Atlantic and Northern Illinois and Towson as their non-con. They go to Wisconsin, have a bye week. They're home for Washington, home for Nebraska, travel to UCLA, then another bye week. Home for Indiana, at Rutgers, at Illinois, home for Michigan, at Michigan State.
Yeah, I don't love this schedule for them. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world. They don't get many great games at home, though. I mean, Michigan State at the end of the year.
I think it's
Washington.
I think it's a little easier than last year, because last year they had Penn State, Iowa, Oregon, and USC and Indiana.
They've got it's. So the other thing too. So a couple, like, and this is the thing.
Are they going 2 years in a row without Ohio State?
Correct.
Wow.
But it's funny, as long as we're talking about traditional Big Ten opponents for Maryland, they haven't beaten one of those since 2023. You have to go back to the end of the 2023 season when they beat Rutgers, because they didn't win any of them last year their one Big Ten win was that 1 point game against USC.
USC, yep.
So they're gonna have to get the thing restarted here. And again, I'd like if they had Wisconsin at home, I'd be feeling a lot better about that. Washington at home's okay, but
I'm not. Well, yeah, they're not gonna. They're probably gonna win in Camp Randall, but Wisconsin is.
Well, that's the thing.
We'll get to them in a second.
It's like if they'd like to have Wisconsin at home. That's what I'm saying. There's just no until Michigan State the last week of the season. There's no sweetheart home game for them here.
God, that is a tough. Yeah, that's tough sledding.
It's and again. Like you're talking about, Scuzz is painting a picture that maybe they can gel on offense and play some track meet football. But you got to understand, when they play a team like Nebraska's playing really good football on one side of the ball right now. Like, Nebraska's defense is locked into place. You can even look at a game like at UCLA and be like, UCLA has problems, but they've got some good coaching. They've got guys that have been there for a little while, like at least on one side of the ball. Like, there are things going where it's like you have to understand Maryland's in a worse place than some of these teams you would expect Maryland to match up with. Now, again, that's where not having a great home slate hurts them. But, maybe they can find some. If they can find what Scuzz is talking about piecing together, then maybe. But again, also understand that, if they win those 3 cupcakes, but then they go on some losing streak, and they could easily lose to Wisconsin, Washington, Nebraska, and UCLA, and then head into Indiana and get clocked, that you may not see Loxley beyond that point.
They could legitimately go over. I mean, this is...
Yeah,
this is one of the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten. One of the 3 worst teams. Yeah, one of the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten. Along with Purdue, pretty easily, and because the Michigan State game's on the road, the UCLA game's on the road, the Wisconsin game's on the road, even the Rutgers game on the road,
right. That's what I mean. I'm like, there's just a lot of bad news here. If they could flip the slate or something like that, because there are games like Indiana, Michigan, they're gonna get Illinois, probably even they're gonna get just clocked. But yeah, I don't know. We have no animosity toward Maryland or anything. If they can get it turned around, they can get it turned around. I just don't. There's not a lot for me to like here. Maybe their offense can really find it and they can somehow kick into gear. A guy named Malik Washington portends well for college success. But,
Indeed. Maybe that's why I'm trying to plant that seed of hope, because I see that name and it just gives me warm fuzzies.
Right.
If you or a loved one is seriously injured by someone else's negligence, hire Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade prosecuting murder cases in Chicago, Simpson opened his own firm focused on wrongful death and personal injury cases. He specializes in car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and other transportation accidents, as well as construction accidents, medical negligence, slip and falls, product liability, and more. Millions recovered for clients, no fee unless he wins. The Simpson Law Group. Compassion, empathy, and vigorous advocacy. Go to SinsonLawGroup.com or call 312-332-2107 for a free consultation, and go Cats. So let's now talk about Rutgers. You mentioned like with Maryland, not having a win over a traditional Big Ten opponent in a while, but like it's wild that they've been in the conference long enough that is something you can say. you know, they do have some traditional rivals now. It's not like the long-term traditional rivals when they were back in the ACC, but still, they've been in the conference long enough, and kind of their conference buddy in this is Rutgers. Rutgers team that went 7-6 last year, improved under Greg Schiano again, and it seems to be trending upwards a little bit. They're not the doormat of the Big Ten like they used to be. They're not the top of the Big Ten. I don't see them getting there, but this could be a solid team. Tell us about their D.
Yeah, well, I guess when we talk about their schedule, a larger picture, and Scuzz can talk about it too. The way that Rutgers season was so bizarre because in the middle of the season, like it seemed like the wheels just completely fell off. I watched that Rutgers Wisconsin game, and it was like a crime against football. And then somehow they pulled it together later, and they just this bizarre season because we were definitely high on them at some point. But from a defensive perspective, I'm kind of excited to talk about this one because. And we talked about this at the beginning of the pod. I think some of you guys come to the West Pirates summer previews because you're looking for angles, you're looking for intel that maybe you won't see in other places. And some of that's based on prep we do for the pod, but a lot of it is based on the fact that we've been doing these for so long. And with a broader lens, you can zoom in on some of the things that are really important. And Rutgers is a big time example of that. And I'll talk about one of those things right now. So there was a rocket ship of a guy who blew through this conference over the past 3 years. And he's a guy who's very likely going to become very famous outside of the Big Ten. And we're probably going to talk about him a lot more when we get to Minnesota. And his name is Corey Heatherman. And there's a really strong chance that you, listening to this pod right now, don't know who this person is. So Heatherman
I'm
came
on
up.
this pod right now, and I don't know who that is.
Yes,
Ditto.
So that's the thing, is Corey Heatherman came up under a guy who made a really big name for himself in the Big Ten last year. You might have heard of him. His name's Curt Cignetti. But Corey Heatherman spent his time with Cignetti at James Madison as a position coach and a DC. And then back in 2021, Heatherman was hired away from JMU to become Rutgers linebackers coach. And he was phenomenal at that job. In fact, his work with Rutgers linebackers was so good that the position group effectively became the anchor of an otherwise moribund defense, and he lifted that defense to a whiff of respectability. We talked about this on the pod for several years, but one sleeper, low-key thing about Rutgers is you could always count on them having 3 solid linebackers every year. Now, maybe their defensive line sucked, and maybe they couldn't cover anybody, but they were set at linebacker. Well, prior to the 2025 season, when we spoke very positively about Rutgers' defensive chances for the upcoming year, Heatherman left Rutgers to take a promotion and become Minnesota's defensive coordinator. And then 2 things happened. Minnesota's defense got really, really good, and Rutgers' defense got really, really bad. The Scarlet Knights had the 2nd worst total defense in the conference last year and the number 14 scoring defense. Crucially, though, going to what we were just talking about, Rutgers was awful against the run. Only Wisconsin and Purdue had worse run defenses on the ground than Rutgers did. And the thing is, we knew coming into the season that Rutgers had a bad defensive line. I just told you that's typical of Rutgers. But they'd been making up for that for several years with awesome, capable linebacker play, which went out the window when Heatherman went out the window. And then, after this past season, Rutgers' best defender by far, linebacker Mohamed Torre, transferred out to go play for the Miami Hurricanes and the Hurricanes' brand new defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman. Are you getting the picture here? This is the kind of places Corey Heatherman's going, and any place he stops, that place gets better. And Rutgers had him, but they don't have him anymore. Now he's a Miami Hurricane. And a guy, the person who most definitely knew this was true was Rutgers' best defensive player, who left to go to Miami and play for Corey Heatherman. So Rutgers is going to be trying to accomplish a ton through the portal this year. The entire starting defensive line may be composed of inbound transfers. Rutgers still has a solid linebacker in Dariel Jabome, but in hindsight, it's pretty clear that Rutgers, a place without a long-standing defensive tradition, benefited tremendously from an ascendant, phenomenal young coach that the Knights no longer have. So it feels like we're back to square one here, and this is Rutgers. It's not a place where you want to be at square one. It's hard to read that as a good sign. The program as a whole, and maybe Scuzz can talk about it, they may still be finding some life, but suddenly the floor fell out on this defense, and they got a long way back up.
Offensively, it looks like they got a lot back. Ethan Kaliak-Manis wasn't terrible last year. He wasn't great, but he wasn't bad.
The Ethan Kaliak-Manis Kirk Shiraka connection.
It's amazing.
I gave Rutgers a lot of flowers last year because I thought that they could make offensive improvement a 2-year trend, and they blew by my expectations. So my general take last year was, gosh, they did better in year one of Shiraka than I thought they would, especially with just really rough quarterback play from Gavin Wimsatt and I'm forgetting the name of the other dude.
Exactly.
But with Kaliak-Manis coming in, given his history with Shiraka at Minnesota, given he was a guy that like a lot of people thought pretty highly of, it was pretty surprising that he didn't end up staying at Minnesota. And you felt like maybe that was, new offensive coordinator, didn't feel good, yada, yada, yada. Like, he looked great last year at Rutgers. They averaged almost 30 points a game, a near touchdown increase from 2023. And before you retort by going all creamy frosting on me, they put up 31 points on Illinois, 41 on Michigan State, and 41 on K-State in their final 3 games. Kaliak-Manis last year attempted 100 more passes than he did the prior season at Minnesota. He also attempted 100 more passes than Rutgers' entire team attempted in 2023. Despite those increased attempts, Kaliak-Manis threw fewer interceptions than both his own prior form and Rutgers as a team, while adding over 1,000 yards to the offense. That is a dramatic improvement. And this is really relevant because he is back again, like you mentioned, Sam. He gets to play in the same offensive system 2 years in a row for the very first time in his career. 2 of his top 3 targets, unheralded as they may be, are also back, as is a ton of offensive line production and depth. Rutgers does lose Kyle Monagai, and that's probably the biggest concern because he was the kind of the straw that stirred the drink, if you will, last year. Went to the NFL draft, but they had a guy, Antoine Raymond, who was pretty darn good as the number 2 last year, 500 yards and 8 touchdowns on only 100 carries. So this is a real solid setup. Shiraka is in year 3. I don't know, for whatever reason, because he was so dynamite at Minnesota in that 2019, 2018 timeframe. Had the weird dalliance with Penn State, came back to Minnesota, was excellent again, and left almost immediately for Rutgers, where he had coached here. He coached at Rutgers before, so you got to think he's got a connection and a relationship with Schiano, et cetera. So I guess presume Shiraka's going to continue to build and make hay here at Rutgers, and I think their offense is going to be decent as a result. Their weakness, if you will, last year I said a lack of explosive weapons would keep them from being a great offense, and this is still the case. For all his production, Kaliak-Manis was still below 7 yards per attempt, and no receivers averaged more than 15 yards per catch. There's a chance to improve. They get a really productive transfer who was at Washington State a couple years ago, was in JUCO last year, DT Sheffield, and then their top incoming high school recruit this year is a wide receiver. So they're trying to add some talent. There's not a ton of depth. I think they will be really solid across the board. Kaliak-Manis had his jump last year. He's probably not going to jump again in production this year. It'll maybe be marginally a little bit better, and we'll see if they can get that much more efficiency out of familiarity with the scheme, improved depth. Maybe a couple of these wide receivers hit and they get a little more explosion. But they have a chance to really have I'll say the componentry of a better offense. The problem is that the number of top defenses they play this year goes up a lot. And this may be the case where an offense is truly better and improving, or at least like really hold serve with what they were the prior year. And yet none of us see it because the level of competition has gone up big time.
Yes.
They trade Nebraska, Wisconsin, and USC for Iowa, Oregon, and Penn State. Plus they add the Buckeyes. So while everything this offense might do technically will be better or more solid, more consistent, etc., their actual ability to execute and produce is going to be really muted.
So let's talk about that schedule. They open up the season at home against Ohio, and then Miami of Ohio, and Norfolk State rounds out their non-con. Then they're home for Iowa, at Minnesota, and then they get a bye week on October 4th. They travel to Washington. They come home to play Oregon before going on the road again to Purdue and Illinois. Home for Maryland, get another bye week on November 15th. They finish up the season at Ohio State and home for Penn State.
This schedule sucks.
Yeah, it does.
It really does.
Rough putting it mildly.
This is like I'm kind of torn because one, Scuzz mapped out that there's actually a lot of good offensive things going on with this football team right now, and I think we've become aware. And one team who's like a bear on Rutgers' schedule, Illinois, is a good example of this. I'm like, actually having a quarterback, it might be Ethan Kaliak-Manis, but having a quarterback who started a lot of football games, but having a quarterback who's had multiple years in and off, guy who's had flux where finally he's getting a couple of years in a row. Like we talked about, Scuzz highlighted better than anybody the fact that Illinois is now bearing so much fruit from the fact that they're one of the only teams with actual continuity at quarterback and offensive coordinator for a couple of years. And Rutgers has that right now. And like Scott said, Kaliak-Manis' numbers last year were pretty good. Like, there's a lot to like there, but their defense sucks and their schedule's horrific. And I'm like, Miami of Ohio, it's kind of the same kind of team they were last year. Like, they're viewed as an incredibly dangerous team in the MAC with a good defense, just like last year. Like, the amount of great defenses Rutgers plays is insane. Miami of Ohio, Iowa, Minnesota, Oregon, Illinois, Ohio State, Penn State. That's like all the good defenses in the conference.
It's rough.
Yeah.
I like them better than Miami of Ohio. I think you can circle 6 win pretty easy here, right? Mm-hmm. Ohio, Miami of Ohio, Norfolk State, at Minnesota, who they beat last year as well. And
I'd rather be them than Purdue or Maryland.
And then Purdue and Maryland, right? So that is 6 extremely winnable games. Finding number 7 is damn near impossible. At Washington, woof. Home against Penn State or Oregon, or Iowa, triple
woof.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing. This doesn't feel like a bad football team. Like we've talked and we'll talk about some very bad football teams. Rutgers is a half decent team with a good offense and just a bad defense, but they needed the schedule roulette wheel to come up a lot better for them this year than it did. This feels like 5 or 6 to me.
Now that being said, if they can get Iowa on September 20th, then not only are they on pace for a 7-5 year, but maybe something crazy happens. Maybe they win at Washington. Maybe they win at Illinois.
Maybe.
I'm not going to give them one of the big 3, but they have had the defensive coaching and the defensive talent notwithstanding. They've had more stability than just about anybody else on offense.
Yeah, again, in another year with a better schedule, 7, 8 for sure. Um, and yeah, maybe there's some world right where they get the 3 non-con. They beat Iowa at home. They pull that one out, and then yeah, it's so funny though. Even I'm trying to talk myself into like yeah, and then there's like this amazing. They get the 6-0. It's like they'd have to go on the road to Minnesota and Washington in back-to-back games, and then like pull it out. They'll have a buy-in there, but it's just a shitty schedule. Like
Yep.
it's just a rough road. Whatever hay they can make, they better make it early.
Finally, tonight, we are going to talk about Wisconsin.
Badgers?
Badgers.
Badgers?
Yes.
Yeah,
Gonna finish the bit
No.
or no?
No, he's gonna-
Okay.
how many Badgers do you need, Scuzz? Is
I
there an
have
amount?
okay. Sidebar. I'm sorry to do this, but I've got to. I wanted to do it earlier, and I restrained myself, and I can no longer do so. My children have reached the age where I'm showing them clips from Weird Al Yankovic's movie UHF,
Nice.
which is where the Badgers, we don't need no stinking Badgers line comes from. Also in that movie that I wanted to drop at the end of the Maryland preview is not many people know this, but the turtle is nature's suction cup. Licks the
so
turtle,
good.
throws it up, it sticks to the ceiling. Look, it sticks.
So
Just-
good.
And now it makes me so sad that I feel like whatever the whole younger wing of our fandom just has no idea what you're talking about. It's like what?
Today we're teaching poodles how to fly. All right, I'm done.
All right. So Wisconsin. This is a team that was good a while back.
They were. I know. It's.
Then the defensive coordinator, who should have been their defensive coordinator for life, is now in his second year as defensive backs coach for the Broncos. So I'm a fan of that. But woof.
I mean that.
I still
that
cannot
was-
believe they gummed that up.
That Wisconsin game for us was such a frustrating football game. I mean, you all know the
Madness.
Northwestern Wisconsin game was such a maddeningly frustrated, just nothing but a parade of self-inflicted wounds by us in that game. And man, when you step back and you look at this crappy Wisconsin football team, that one just stings all the more. But that's neither here nor there when talking about where Wisconsin is overall, which, yeah, is not a good place.
So run us through their defense, John.
Oh, God. I mean, this is one of these things, like, regarding the fact that, like, Fickle as a defensive coach, right? And, like, the culture coming in but, I mean, like, we've been having these discussions privately and amongst, like, with our, like, friends, like the Winning Cures Everything boys and, like, just different in kind of disbelief. But I mean, let's like say it publicly and keep it a buck right here. Luke Fickell is arguably the worst coach in the Big Ten right now. It's a really easy argument to make. Him signing that extension in the offseason is laughable. And I say all that fully, like, this is a guy we all heaped plaudits onto. Luke Fickell was phenomenal at Cincinnati. It was, everyone's like, I hate that they're getting rid of Jim Leonard, but Luke Fickell, like, what a hire!
I got to tell you, John, we just had a robust discussion around Mike Loxley. Last is hard. Last is a hard pill to swallow.
Well, here's the thing though. You're not wrong, but this is a guy who came in with all the momentum in the world.
Yeah,
right.
true.
I mean, this is Luke Fickell coming into Wisconsin, a great football team. He's coming in high off of this, like, he. In the current situation, like those would have been playoff teams at Cincinnati, with all the momentum in the world, and has absolutely blown it. So defensively, Wisconsin's a bad defensive football team right now. This was the number 12 total defense in the Big Ten last year at Wisconsin. It's Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Badgers. Keep that in mind when I tell you they were second to last in the conference in sacks. The Wisconsin Badgers were last out of 18 Big Ten teams in tackles for loss at the University of Wisconsin. And And we 100% predicted that things were headed this way last year. Wisconsin's been on this trajectory ever since they made what may go down as one of the worst coaching decisions in college football in the past 10 to 15 years, which is, again, the fact that Jim
John,
Leonard...
I got Scott Frost on line 2 over here.
Yeah, I mean, the Big Ten's had some peaches. You're right. But I mean, again, Jim Leonard is with Sammy's Denver Broncos right now. And all Leonard had done up to the point that Wisconsin got rid of him was be the greatest defensive coordinator of his era in college football. And Mike Tressel has not been that. Does it get worse? It sure does. Safety Hunter Wohler, easily the best player on this defense, is with the Colts now. The Badgers return Ricardo Hallman, who is a solid cornerback. But who cares? Look, I know that we just talked about Rutgers, and I know we're going to get there soon, but Lord have mercy, have you seen this friggin' schedule? We'll circle back to it. But more importantly, ahead of the schedule piece, from my end of it, this should lord over any discussion of Wisconsin defensive football in all of your minds right now, all of you listening. Can you name one Wisconsin linebacker or one Wisconsin defensive lineman? One. Can you name one guy?
Leo
This
Chanel?
is the school.
Oh,
this
wait,
is
no,
the
he's
school
gone.
that gave you. Yeah, this is the school that gave you J.J. Watt, T.J. Watt, Zach Bond, Leo Chanel, Keanu Benton, Nick Herbig, Jack Sanborn, Chris Borland, Mema Jongmada, and on and on. You can't name one guy in the front seven of this defense. That's how far this defense has fallen in the Luke Fickell era, a era that started with all the momentum in the world and a guy with a massive defensive pedigree, a massive name recognition, and the theoretical ability to take this Wisconsin team to new heights and recruit at an extremely high level. They had all of that. And instead, it's gone totally in the other direction. So I'll guarantee you, I would say Fickell might survive another one of these defensive stinkers. Tressel will not. It's just too proud of a defensive tradition here. And I stress, all of you longtime listeners know that this is a defense we've been in love with, probably for almost a solid decade of these pods. I mean, Wisconsin is a standard for defensive excellence in this conference. They're one of the best of the best. They are Jim Leonard crushing people's souls with 3-4 blitz schemes, okay? And sending guys to the NFL. That's Wisconsin football. And again, that team is last in the conference in tackles for loss right now. So again, like, they are in a bad place defensively. But again, there are some teams that would be like number 12 total defense in the conference is okay to some. Wisconsin historically expects to be second, third, fourth in the conference. They're in a dark place right now, and it does not show many signs of getting better.
So, Scuzz, how's that air raid going for them?
Speaking of proud tradition, last year when we previewed Wisconsin, I mean, we were all kind of just like grasping at straws on how has this gone so poorly for Luke Fickell. And I made the comp to Rich Rod. Rich Rod only gummed up the Michigan offense, folks. And there have been some extenuating circumstances, but much like the defense has gone totally sideways, the offense has also gone totally sideways. The air raid is done. It's over. They're going back to what they used to do.
Huh. How about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think all the talk going in the last year was about like how much of a misfit the offense was in 2023, and I said I give them credit at least for they kind of figured out like in the second, the ball would never leave Tanner Mordecai's hands in the first half of games. He'd be throwing the ball, he'd be running the ball, he'd be out. Like the quarterback was running more than the running backs at Wisconsin with the best flipping offensive line in the Big Ten. And in the second half of games, they'd be like, give it to Braylon Allen, and he would save their bacon. And I thought that would help them kind of like think things over last year, and it didn't. And it got a little bit worse. And Phil Lungo, the OC, was let go after the Oregon game. And now, somewhat hysterically, Luke Fickell has hired Jeff Grimes away from Kansas, and Jeff basically runs the like a version of the similar version to what Wisconsin used to run before Fickell got there. So this whole like we're going to change our offense so that we can be more nationally relevant and attract better quarterback and wide receiver recruits and have a better opportunity to beat the likes of Ohio State and compete in Rose Bowls and playoff games, etc. That is all out the window. And it's just insane to say those words out loud. This whole situation has just totally blown up in their face. At the same time, like they haven't been abysmal. And when they have been abysmal, it's been a lot due to bad luck, right? So when they reverted to leaning on Braylon Allen and being a little bit, smarter about playing a Wisconsin version of the air raid in 2023, their offense was all right. And last year, the guy they brought in to be their quarterback injured himself in the third game against Alabama running the ball and didn't play the rest of the season. And so, there's a little bit of bad luck there, but they also, Lungo this was an offense that had zero ideas and zero adjustments for 2 seasons. So back to the drawing board, and that drawing board, there are some real reasons to be optimistic that Wisconsin can bounce back a bit on offense. You got to think that they're going to get a little bit better. I can't help wondering if it'll be enough to matter, especially with what you just heard from John on the other side of the ball. So let's get into the details. Typical Wisconsin, lots of talent on offensive line and some really high pedigree running backs. The new scheme under Grimes is like a wide zone running scheme. It's a lot. I mean, it is so similar to what Paul Chryst used to do. Speedster Dylan Jones, I think, has a really good potential to break out. He redshirted last year, but he's a great fit for the blocking schemes. The offensive line depth is a bit shaky. They've already lost their presumed left tackle, and what is a very obvious strength on paper becomes pretty meh if they take on more injuries. But should they stay pretty healthy and solid, they're going to be good. I feel like Wisconsin always, at least for the last, however many years, that the wide receiver core has just been a giant question mark. And this year they bring back Vinny Anthony. He was their top guy last year. He's got some big playability, but they're really hoping on some magic from a handful of transfers and step up from guys who had flashes last season to create a dynamic wide receiver core. To put it in context, Wisconsin had only 130 more receiving yards than Northwestern last year, and that was in an air raid scheme.
Lord have mercy.
And we had Jack Lausch at quarterback.
Exactly. And they had Braden Locke was not good, but it was also his second year as a starting quarterback. So rough sledding. Now they don't lack for athleticism in the wide receiver. I mean, they had Will Pauling last year. Will Pauling is going to be the number 2 receiver at Notre Dame this season. He transferred out. I mentioned Anthony's back. They've got a guy named Trey Kekuhuna, who turned heads. He looks really dynamic, really athletic, but doesn't really show up in the box score. T.Y. Hilton's kid is a recruit coming in this year. There's a guy that transferred from Ohio State. I mean, that hasn't always worked for other guys that have transferred from Ohio State. Look at Julian Fleming in Penn State last year. So there's pieces and there's some potential, but it's a bit hopeful right now. The next interesting piece is the quarterback. And so they're taking their third shot at a transfer QB in as many years. It's Billy Edwards coming over from Maryland. Edwards was good at Maryland. He kind of had a penchant for throwing picks, and he had a big penchant for taking sacks. The offensive line should help with the latter. And Billy Edwards should be better than Braden Locke was last year. But this isn't really a big upgrade. Like, you wouldn't put Billy Edwards on the same tier as like Tyler Van Dyke, who was supposed to take this offense to another level last season. I also think it's really important to consider that Billy Edwards was good last year at Maryland, throwing to Ty Felton, Caden Prather, and Octavian Smith. Even if this Wisconsin wide receiver core is kind of the best of what everybody thinks they can be, they can't hold a candle to those three guys. So it really does come down to Grimes, and that he can completely right the ship with his offensive style. It's referred to as reliably violent offense, RVO. It emphasizes a physical attacking approach with running the football, play action passing, and utilizing motion and misdirection to confuse defenses. Tough physical run game paired with creative play action passing concepts.
So those words that you just said are words in English, but like that doesn't mean anything as far as an offense is concerned. I mean, come on. Everyone wants to be a hard-nosed attacking offense with motion and play action. Come on. Like
Violence.
What? Violence? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what Wisconsin used to be under Paul Christ and Brett Bielema. Now, granted, I don't know that you would use the word creative with anything that Chris did in the passing game, but I also can't help thinking like Grimes was calling plays last year at Kansas with Jalen Daniels at quarterback, and whether you like Edwards or not, he ain't Jalen Daniels. And Grimes hasn't exactly lit the world on fire with his offense in his last few stops. What's crazy to me is that this is exactly who Fickle should have hired in 2023. Imagine Tanner Mordecai plus Braylon Allen and that offensive line in this offense. That sounds sick. It sounds like an absolute bulldozer rolling downhill with fun stuff on the back end when defenses are like, throw 11 in the box. It's pretty clear to me that the 2025 roster does not fit this offensive style as well as 2023 would have. It might still be a much better recipe than last season was. And I mean, how could it not? The last 2 years were the lowest 2-year offensive output at Wisconsin since 91 and 92. But again, and John, you kind of alluded to it. With the defensive performance and B, with the schedule. I don't know that it will be enough to matter at all in the win-loss column. And that could spell the end of the Luke Fickell era at Wisconsin, which is the most insane thing that any of us have said yet on this podcast tonight.
Didn't he just sign an extension, though? I mean,
maybe that will protect him. But,
Sam, take us through the schedule, and then we can talk about how he's going to be
this could get ugly.
It's gonna. I mean, this schedule, also known as the SAW franchise.
So they open up the year with Miami of Ohio, who we've talked about. You know, it's a solid MAC team. Then Middle Tennessee. Okay, I don't see what the problem is here. A road trip.
I don't see what the problem is.
Checks notes. Alabama. Okay. Yep. Then they come home to play Maryland. They have a week off. Then they're at Michigan. Home for Iowa. Home for Ohio State. At Oregon. They got a bye week. Good.
That's 4 consecutive weeks.
This is
my God.
Surely it gets better now.
I'm not done. Washington at home. At Indiana. Home for Illinois. At Minnesota. My God. Hide the women and children.
I mean,
please.
This is, so for anyone who didn't know, this is the hardest schedule in the country. Easily. How many games can they lose here? 9. Easily. I can find you 9 rolling out of bed here.
Yep.
This is an absolute nightmare.
I was just counting, John, as you were speaking that sentence, and I was like, 7, 8. Oh my God, it's 9. Right as you said the word 9. It's like flip it. 3 and 9 is on the bingo card, friends,
and well placed on the bingo card.
I mean, this is horrific. You can flip it around. How do you feel about Wisconsin's chances to sweep Miami of Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, Maryland, Iowa, Washington, Minnesota. You better feel pretty good about it because otherwise they're probably not going to bowl.
Yeah,
They
they'll
need
go 5
all
and 7
six of
again.
yeah, they need all 6 of those. And you can't be like, well, what if they go like 5 and 1? Friends, look at the other half of this schedule. It is horrific. And again, this is not, and this is like Scuzz has been hammering this home. And I hope I can contribute to this same thing. Is like, this is not the Wisconsin of 3-4 attacking blitzes and running the ball doggedly behind giant fatties come hell or high water. That's not what Wisconsin is anymore. They blew it up. They blew it up on their own. And now
reasons.
they are right. And now they are, for reasons. And now they're trying to put it back together again in the face of the worst schedule in the nation. It's like a scenario where 3 and 9 and they clean house is on the table, and 4 and 8 and they clean house on the table for sure. You don't have to squint too hard, Sammy, to imagine that a penitent team shows up on the doorstep of your Denver Broncos looking to win someone's good graces over again. But I mean, again, like all the buzzwords, the words that this guy's talked about in that offensive approach. I mean, you can say all the right things, and it's like, look, you went around the world just to come back to right where you started and realize that you should have never left the thing you were doing all along. That's all well and good, but this is not the schedule to try to be putting back the pieces back together against. And again, they're in a bad place defensively right now. Like, whatever you have in your head when you think of Wisconsin, they are not that, and they are not that heading into the worst schedule in the nation. Everything about this feels bad.
I cannot get over the fact that they had Braylon Allen and the best offensive line that they maybe had in a decade. And 2 years later, they've hired an offensive coordinator who runs something called the reliably violent offense.
Yeah.
Like, you could not have written this script. They switched to the air raid, and they did it in the most like aggressive and ripcord pulling way possible.
And it's like everyone above a certain age that's listening to this pod is screaming Bill Callahan right now, and you're not wrong.
Yeah, it's Bill Callahan killing the option at Nebraska. It's Rich Rod completely upending 3 decades of tradition at Michigan. There's a reason that schools do embrace those things, because identity matters. We've talked about this on the pod over the years. Identity matters so much. And if A, you don't know who you are or what you are, or B, your component parts don't match who you're trying to be, your identity is effed, and it rips a hole in your program.
And with like longer term ramifications, because like you've now spent a couple years recruiting for an air raid offense.
Yep.
And
it's right.
You've got all of these high schools in Wisconsin who are like churning out the big boys to go play offensive line. They're like, really? Do we really want to send our guys there? That takes a while to fix.
There is not an amount of money Wisconsin would not pay right now, I feel like, in their heart of hearts, to hire Brett Bielema away from the University of Illinois. And it's like, this is the winding road. It's like, and again, Luke Fickell was an awesome hire from Cincinnati, and was a big time coach who was ultra ascendant and was just, on top of the world, it seemed like, at the time that the Badgers hired him. But they sure sold the farm to get him, in terms of getting rid of Leonard and in terms of installing, as Scuzz outlined, everything that they installed here. And it did not work. And I mean, again, maybe they find some miracle sauce here, but even getting to 6 wins on this schedule is going to take a Herculean effort for this team.
Yeah, it's just wild. And I mean, I don't really have anything else to say. That's just where Wisconsin
and everyone knows, like every Northwestern fan knows, like we have this whole thing with Wisconsin where we're 500 against them since 1985, and like we trade blows with them, and we have this rivalry. And Wisconsin, the way they play their hard-nosed football, the way they play smash-mouth football and unbelievable defensive football, like no animosity towards that. Like I think a lot of people loved what Wisconsin represented and what they were doing for all of those years. It's like that, like they, along with us in our best years, along with Iowa, just emphasized this like hard-nosed mud pit that was the Big Ten West, and the idea of that like Wisconsin's going to try to run it down your throat and play stifling defense, and you might be one of the best teams in the SEC, and they can still suffocate you. Like all the props in the world for that. Like that's great stuff, but they got to get back to that because where they are right now is just a mess.
So those are half of the teams Northwestern does not play this season. We will come back next time to take a look at Indiana, Washington, Michigan State, and Iowa. The fact that Iowa is on this list is just mind-boggling. I mean,
It's real weird. Iowa and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't think of the last time we didn't play either of those.
It's been a long time. I think Iowa was something like 2012 or something. I was looking it up.
Yeah, wow. But in any case, we'll go ahead and leave it there for tonight. Head to our website, westlawpirates.com, where you can leave comments and questions. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, any social media at Westlaw Pirates. YouTube as well, where you can watch our shows or listen to our shows on YouTube. Video's not there yet.
This is truly meant to be a mobile podcast format.
Indeed. You can always email the show, westlawpirates@gmail.com. Tune in next time as we give our visceral and statistical views on Northwestern athletics. And look for us in the West Tech lot, I believe, John, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right off Sheridan Road.
West Tech lot of the new Lakeside Stadium, Martin Stadium. We're flying the red pirate flag because we give no quarter, especially the fourth. For John Lacombe and Eric Scousby, I'm Sam Walter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.